It's bent. That's what they've done. And you, sir, should not be facilitating it.
Fact. But on a point of order, back to the right honourable gentleman, he did use a very unparliamentary, and it is unparliamentary, forgive me, he will have to withdraw it. He used the word bent. I'm afraid that is unparliamentary. And I would ask, before I call the former leader of the House, I would ask that... Order. Sorry, I can only take one point at a time. I'm dealing with...
That is your ruling, sir.
No, he doesn't have the authority to order you to withdraw in a committee. The Speaker has that authority on the floor of the House. The Chairman of a committee does not have that authority.
I'm grateful to Mark. For the avoidance of doubt.
He can ask you, but
for the avoidance of doubt, I'll withdraw it anyway. You and I have known each other many years. If you think that word was disorderly, out of respect for you, mindful of my right honourable friend's point, I will withdraw it. I replace bent with rigged.
It's not a matter of what's disorderly, not disorderly. It's a matter of what the House thinks. I've heard a lot worse, I can assure you, over those. For the information of all members, it may be helpful to know that, as explained by Mr. Speaker in the House earlier today, members who have not been nominated to the committee are able to attend and speak in delegated legislation committees. I think we heard that clearly from Mr. Speaker earlier. I understand that there may be members wishing to make points of order, and I just think for the orderliness of these proceedings, it might be helpful to have those points of order now, not precluding later points of order perhaps on other issues or even the same issue. But there are many experienced members in this committee today, and I think for the orderliness of getting through the business, I can take points of order now if members so wish before I call the Minister. So James Duddridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a point of order. On a point of order, I was nominated to this committee. I was prepared to be part of this committee. I was asked to absent myself from the committee. I refused to absent myself to the committee because I had points to make and queries to make. And when I suggested I might vote against, I was subsequently removed from the committee. That is an outrage to the House. I believe that this legislation does require scrutiny. I will listen to the debate, but I don't think 90 minutes is going to be sufficient time to hear all the speakers, let alone conclude all the issues. But more importantly, can you go back to Mr. Speaker, and if it's the feeling of this committee, and review the process? Because never in my 18 years do I know of a single Member of Parliament that has been removed from a committee list who hasn't asked to be removed from a committee list. And in this case, it happened 4 or 5 times. I suspect there's an element of incompetence rather than actual attacking members' rights to debate. But this does need to be looked into. And I seek your guidance, if we don't finish the debate here, whether more time can be allocated on the floor to discuss the principle and the content of this legislation. I'm sure it's something the Chief Whip would want to know more about alongside fishing interests.
Other points of order?
Point of order.
Mr.
Chairman, as the papers aren't ready for this meeting and not sufficiently supplied for all the members who are attending, I suggest the meeting be adjourned until the papers can be provided.
Well, first of all, any other points of order?
Yes.
Further point of order.
I think that point of order is fundamental, because without the papers, how can people consider this properly? All that is available when I came in is the explanatory memorandum. The list of members isn't available, which seems to me to be a deeply unsatisfactory state of affairs when the names of the members have changed so rapidly during the course of the day. When we're playing the hokey-cokey with members of a committee, the House at least ought to be informed of who the members are. So I would just suggest a brief adjournment whilst the papers are provided, and then we should come to the other points of order.
Further to that point, two quick points. So firstly, can you confirm that if these proceedings are interrupted, and we understand the knife on the immigration bill is at 6:26, and if you're a cynic, you believe the government deliberately timed it for this evening, knowing that the debate would be ripped up by all these votes, bearing in mind we had 18 votes on the immigration bill last week. So if you're a cynic, it's perfectly obvious to see what the government have done. They've timed it now, so the debate will be interrupted by the votes. But can you confirm there's injury time, so the debate would then begin quite a long while again later after those votes have taken place? And secondly, for the record, the Committee of the Selection nominated members to this SI last week in the normal way, including the members for Windsor, Rochford and South End East, Devizes, Dudley North and Don Valley. And I understand that some or all of those people indicated to the whips in conversations over the weekend that they had what the theologians might call doubts about the government's approach, and some even threatened to vote against. Whereupon they were summarily removed from the committee by the whips using a procedure which is normally only used for last-minute substitutions in very special circumstances. For instance, if a member of a member's family was ill, for instance. In 22 years in this House, I've never known the whips from either side do this. This is beyond sick-form politics. This is manipulating the parliamentary process because the Windsor Framework is clearly a failure, and it's such a failure the whips have to rig committees to get it through, and they found a bunch of other members at short notice who perhaps, shall we say, are not quite as inquisitive of the 5 who were novel. Have you, in your time in this House, so you've been here a long while, ever known anything quite as shameful as this?
Not further to that point of order, Richard. I thoroughly endorse what my own friend member for Southend has said, and also a member for Rayleigh. I've been here for nearly 40 years, and I've never seen anything like this. And I really do deeply resent the fact that this is being done in the manner in which it's being done, and that the already statements have been made on the floor of the House, which are part of the record. And it's an extraordinary situation. I've never seen anything like it. I think it's outrageous.
Further to that point of order, Mr. Pritchard, it seems to me that these issues raise serious matters of privilege, which obviously have to be referred to the Speaker confidentially and not a matter for this committee to consider, but that if members are obstructed from carrying out their duties as members, that is a molestation of a member. A member who has been appointed to committee and summarily is removed from it without the chairman of the committee of selection being informed, or indeed the member concerned being informed, seems to me to raise prima facie matters of privilege which should be referred to Mr. Speaker, and therefore I would suggest that this committee again be adjourned. We still don't have the papers, so I think there are now 2 good reasons for adjourning this committee.
Quite right.
Okay. Well, thank you. Can I just say that I think with the government whip here that the strong feelings of some members of this committee have been noted by the government whips. Can I just say on the point of membership and the paperwork being available, that paperwork is en route. In fairness to the committee staff, I suspect they didn't anticipate the level of turnout that we currently have this evening. We could suspend the sitting, but I think it might, just one moment please, but I think it might be more helpful if we perhaps encourage the concept of sharing committee papers, and I'm happy to lead by example. Exempli ducimus, as the Leader of the House might know, and I'm very happy for him to come and have my committee membership. Going back to the, just one moment please, back to the ordinance of the committee. So if I may, I think I'll take the decision. The paperwork, it's on its way, it will be here shortly. If he really does need to see the latest list, then I'm happy to provide it to him personally, or he can share with other committee members. I'm sure other comments will be made in a moment. So, but on the just no, you can come back. Forgive me, Sir James, if I may go through. On the committee membership, I think the Speaker had made it clear earlier today that this can be done, and in fact, just a little bit more detail. The committee membership of any committee could be made up to 10 minutes before the committee actually sits. But I actually have the latest list, which I think was done just shortly, 50 minutes before. So on the point that the general point made, on the general point of committee selection and changes, that is perfectly within order, and the convention is that changes can be made up to 10 minutes before the committee sits.
On a point of order,
just one moment. I'd like to finish these points of order. I'm very happy to take others. On the point of votes, this business was timetabled, as indeed the main chamber business timetable, so many days ago, before I think some of the concerns about this committee were raised on the floor of the House. there was a comment made about further time to debate this. I think this was raised on the floor of the House earlier today, and I'm sure that that was noted by Mr. Speaker, and obviously members will have an opportunity to potentially bring this off backbench business or raise it in business questions as a matter perhaps for the House to look at on another occasion in more detail. But the substantive point of concern amongst some members, and no has been noted by the government whips, I hear you as well. I will pass back to the Speaker's office the concern expressed to members. It's right that members should have their voices heard on behalf of their constituents. But I do make the point again that whilst it may not have happened many times in 40 years or 20 years or 10 years, that it is perfectly within order, as Mr. Speaker confirmed earlier today. Point of order, Coach.
On a point of order, Mr. Pritchard, can I just check, because I'm slightly confused by what's going on. I came here as I've been selected to attend the Postal Packets Miscellaneous Amendments Regulations 2023. Can I check that's what we are actually discussing and not the death rows of the Conservative Party Regulations 2023?
Well, I'm grateful for that point of order, and I can say to you that the clerk very ably read out why we are here, and we are definitely going to move on to it at some point. Point of order, Sir Bill Cash.
Any of the matters which are dealt with in this House in our constitutional arrangements.
Just one moment, sorry, sir. The papers have now arrived, and members can claim them on that issue, and the issues of which they know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So many of our arrangements are actually exercised by virtue of conventions. The question of what the precision of a particular rule is has to be weighed against the conventions against which this is actually being conducted on this occasion. The reasons, as my honourable friend have already made quite clear, and also my honourable friend, the member for Southend, the bottom line is this, that actually there are occasions when these conventions are bypassed for good reasons. But under the precept that convention is about the reason for the rule, I can only say this is a gross breach of the convention, because the reasons, it's perfectly apparent, for making the changes that have been made in this committee have nothing to do with the question of whether or not these particular people who are being substituted on the committee were not there in the first place. It is precisely because it's quite clear that they would lose the vote in the committee. That's where the problem lies. That's the constitutional problem which you're faced and which we're faced with.
Can I just say on the point of convention, he's absolutely right, but he will know more than probably anybody else in this committee that this House, apart from Erskine May, parallel to that, runs very much on convention. But I would refer him to the most recent ruling on such an occurrence happening, which was Mr. Speaker this afternoon in the main chamber. So that is the very latest ruling from the Speaker, drawing upon convention, and I'm just a minor member of the Speaker's panel, and he wouldn't expect me to be taking a different view from Mr. Speaker with all the advice that he received. Sir James Duddridge.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. And the honourable member quite rightly asked for the information, and he knew that there had been information put out and additional information been put. But when I was first nominated to the committee, I received additional information that I was hoping to pick up a hard copy, and it's absolutely essential it's circulated through everyone else before we make the decisions. Because whilst I believe there wasn't consultation specifically on this, when appointed to the committee, I received about 6 consultation submissions to this committee, including from the DUP, all that disagreed and had substantive comments to make. I looked at it a little bit. I didn't do all the work in the full knowledge that they would be here. The whole committee would be able to probe that information and probe the Minister on those submissions. And from memory, they were all against. And that was not here at the beginning, and I don't believe copies have been brought in. So I must have to defer to my honourable friend. This committee cannot continue. And the Minister now should withdraw the motion, or Mr. Pritchard, as a defender of the House, you should refuse to go forward, because as a principle of the House, if we don't have the information ahead of us, in front of us, we cannot. You must, one of you, either the Minister or you as Chair, Ms Pritchard, must bring this thing to a halt. And we can always come back. This doesn't need to happen until, I think, the 27th of September 2024. This is not an urgent matter.
No. There are 4 or 5 people, and I just want to try and give as full and comprehensive answers as is possible. First of all the paperwork, whether the right honourable member felt it was here or not here, has been available online. That's the first thing. And just so those people that might not want to read committee papers online, it has been available all the time at the vote office, which I've just had confirmed by
not true. Mr Pritchard, you clearly wouldn't intentionally mislead the House or this committee, but I was at the vote office. I went through, I got all the paperwork, and they said, would you like us to get it for you here? This was at 24 minutes past 5, and I looked, knowing that I had something else quickly to go to. I said, no, that's okay, I don't need you to print it off. It doesn't matter that you haven't got it for members, because it will be in the committee room. I hadn't realised that nobody had got that paperwork, and it is needed.
Can I answer? Forgive me. The advice that I've received is that it is available and was available. If that is not the case, as the Right Honourable Gentleman suggests, can I say that we are, at this point, checking through, we can email directly to the vote office and other clerks to see what the reality is. And if I may, as I take the other points of order, based upon getting a response back, I will give him a fuller answer. But I'm just based upon the advice I've received right now. That advice might change in the next few minutes, and we are seeking clarification, which I suspect the Right Honourable Member would want us to do, rather than speaking in part. Honourable Gentleman. Right Honourable Gentleman. Some upfront.
As we all know, Erskine May, the Bible of parliamentary procedure, cannot account for every possible circumstance under the sun. And therefore, members of Parliament are used to operating within a number of well-understood conventions. You might call them our traditions, for want of a better phrase. And backbenchers, if they see those conventions being deliberately abused, rightfully get very upset, which is exactly what is happening before your eyes. Now, I served for some years on the Committee of Selection, so I know very well how the procedure works. And if someone is nominated to a committee but cannot unfortunately attend, the convention is they try and find a substitute. They ask a friend or a colleague. It might be that, a family member is ill or there's some pressing reason why they can't be there, and they ask someone basically if they can substitute for them. And there is a procedure whereby the whips can facilitate that without having to reconvene the whole Committee of Selection. Everybody understands that. That is the norm. What is not the norm is for people to be taken off a committee against their will. That is completely irregular, and that is what has happened here. 5 times over for the same committee. That is not in order. That is not a convention. It is the government trying to rig a committee and get rid of people who they thought might have the moral courage to vote the wrong way. It's bent. That's what they've done. And you, sir, should not be facilitating it. You yourself admitted, sir, that the final membership of this committee was only finalised 50 minutes before it was due to begin. That's extraordinary. Why? Because there was so many shenanigans going on behind the scenes. So can I offer the whip on duty, who for the record I happen to respect, and the Minister, some genuine advice. Don't move this. Everyone can see this has become a farce. Accept this has gone wrong. It was a mistake. Don't move it and bring it back another time. That is by far the best thing to do under the circumstances. Don't move the order. Allow the dust to settle and let's discuss this. It doesn't come until 2024 when we have more time in the proper way. But do not force this committee to go ahead on a basis which is blatantly and obviously rigged.
A few points in response. Of course, as I said in my preamble, all members can attend and speak. They just can't vote. I know it doesn't address all of his points. So I'm not misunderstood. I received the latest copy about 50 minutes before this began. That was not when the last submissions for changes was made. That was around 10:50 a.m. This morning, just to be absolutely clear, but I get his wider point. On the future and on conventions, I'm glad that he recognises conventions, because on my fourth and final point in response to him, I'm going to mention a convention to him, and that is it is for the Committee of Selection to decide their own rules. If there needs to be more consideration of that, or the Committee of Selection and the House decides there needs to be a more comprehensive review, then that is open for another committee, the Committee of Procedure, to look at it. But that's not a suggestion from the Chair, that is just a matter of fact. But on a point of order, back to the Right Honourable Gentleman, he did use a very unparliamentary, and it is unparliamentary, forgive me, he will have to withdraw it. He used the word bent. I'm afraid that is unparliamentary. And I would ask, before I call the former Leader of the House, I would ask that... Order. Sorry, I can only take one point at a time. I'm dealing with...
That is your ruling, sir.
No, he doesn't have the authority to order you to withdraw in a committee. The Speaker has that authority on the floor of the House. The Chairman of the committee does not have that authority.
I'm grateful to my for the avoidance of doubt.
He can ask you,
For the avoidance of doubt, I'll withdraw it anyway. You and I have known each other many years. If you think that word was disorderly, out of respect for you, mindful of my right honourable friend's point, I will withdraw it. I replace bent with rigged.
It's not a matter of what's disorderly, not disorderly. It's a matter of what the House thinks. I've heard a lot worse, I can assure you, over those many years. Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg.
As you know perfectly well, the rules in committee are very different from those of the rules of the House. If you as Chairman are happy with the order, you may suspend the committee, but my right of friend does not have any obligation to withdraw, and you may then make a report to Mr. Speaker. But the only power you have is to suspend the committee, and it's very important because there is a fundamental difference in committees and the floor of the House.
Well, I'm grateful for that point of order, and possibly coming from the Master of Civility himself, the Right Honourable Gentleman will recognise that his Right Honourable friend, my Right Honourable friend, has already put the record straight, even if he didn't have to, in my Right Honourable friend's opinion. He has done so, for which I am grateful. Sir Bill Cash.
Information as well as a point of order, if I may, Miss.
I am grateful. Sir Bill Cash.
Information as well as a point of order, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I think you just said that the decision was taken by the Committee of Selection, if I heard you correctly. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I would be grateful on a point of information to know whether the changes were made by the Committee of Selection or were made by other persons.
No, what I said earlier in relation to the latest point of order was the Committee of Selection basically sets its own rules. I'm not referring specifically to whether the Committee of Selection was involved in any of the changes. I refer the Right Honourable Gentleman to the reply I gave some moments ago on convention. Whether it is popular or not, it is convention. If the House wants to change the rules, then it's something the House and honourable and right honourable members in this place might want to raise in another place. If they want to raise this debate more comprehensively over a bigger expanse of time, they can do so, as I set out earlier. Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. The piece of legislation we're debating tonight might seem very flimsy, but it is an important piece of legislation insofar as it is all part of the jigsaw which is now being devised to rewrite the map of this country and to remove Northern Ireland from it. And the way in which the Windsor Framework to date has gone through has caused immense anger back in Northern Ireland and, of course, political instability. A 90-minute debate in the House on one part of it, which we're told then accepted the whole framework. And now this today, which we have seen the government so anxious to push through, because this, as we will see once we start examining this piece of legislation actually puts another block in the barrier and the border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. And the government's way of making sure it goes through is to carry out a purge in its own party. And I don't think, and I'm glad to see that those who were purged escaped the gulag and are here tonight to raise their voice in defiance. But, Mr. Pritchard, given the enormity of this and the way in which this has been handled and the perception that this will create of the democratic process in this House, the depths to which the government will step, I believe that it is important that you pay heed to the points that we made. Papers not available, members feeling that they've been harassed out of the positions and removed from the positions because they wish to express a point of view, and a piece of legislation which will be given the most cursory scrutiny. I believe that it is important, and it's a heavy burden on your shoulders, to ask yourself, given what has happened, can this committee proceed and have any integrity at the end of it?
Can I just say to Mr. Wilson, again, it's been noted by the Chair, it will be fed back to Mr. Speaker, the government whips are listening. But what I would say, he refers to me, that this position of Chair, whoever sits in it, the House Convention, Erskine May, and the way the rules and procedures are of this House are greater than one individual, however flawed or not flawed, that might sit here. So it's not a matter of, for me, it's as a matter, whoever sits in the chair is rightly guided and protected, as well as members, by those that have gone before us. Danny Kruger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. May I say how well I think you are doing in this very difficult position. And I just want to try and take some of the heat out of this. Though I agree fully with what my colleagues have so far said and their points of order, the fact is that there's a mistake has been made on behalf of the whips office. I don't understand entirely the procedure by which this happened. Nevertheless, what clearly happened is that by accident... Order! I was about to resolve the problem.
Order, can you please listen in? The first division, 15 minutes. Thereafter, 10 minutes. Be aware, as soon as the shadow minister here, we can proceed. So if colleagues want to come and contribute with points of order or the substantive debate, please come back as quickly as possible. After all the votes. After all the votes, of course. Yes. And we're expecting 9 votes. Thank you, Mr. Order. Sitting is now suspended.